Good evening, and welcome back to the Pastor Study. Did you know that God excels in hopeless situations? Scattered throughout Scripture are stories or accounts of men and women of God who have found themselves backed in a corner in a hopeless situation, in a dead-end situation where there is absolutely, or appears to be absolutely no way out. And along comes God. Perhaps the one that sticks in my mind the most, and it's a very familiar story, is found in Daniel chapter 6. Daniel, a man of God, has been abducted and taken to Babylon like many of his other countrymen. And he continues to serve and worship God. Now that really ticks off the religious leaders of the Babylonian religions. And they go to King Darius and have Darius pass a law that says nobody can worship any other god but me and our God. And Daniel continues to worship Yahweh. And of course, now they've got him right where they want him. They force King Darius to arrest him. They drag him up on the hillside and throw him into a lion's den. And so that we understand for certain what we're talking about here, they take these very hungry lions, put them in a cave, block up the cave. There's a hole in the top of the cave. They drop Daniel in and roll a rock over the top. So Daniel's in there with those lions until it's all said and done. I love what takes place next. In Daniel chapter 6 and verse 16, Darius has thrown Daniel in. And here's what he says. He says, "May the God that you serve all the time rescue you." But the King James gives us a little different flavor this time. Here's what he says in the King James. "Thy God, whom thou servest continually, he will deliver you." And of course, we know the rest of the story. The next day they come and Darius leans over and hollers down into the pit, "Daniel, has your God rescued you?" And Daniel looks up with a smile on his face and says, "Of course, here I am," without a scratch on him. Not too many years before that, a similar scenario happened to three young, again, Hebrews who continued to worship God. Three young men by the name of Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. Nebuchadnezzar, the king previous to Darius, insists that everybody bow and worship his golden statue, a huge golden statue made of gold of Nebuchadnezzar. And these three young men refuse to do it. And he gives them a chance to do it, and they say, "No, our God will deliver us. But even if he doesn't, Nebuchadnezzar, we're not going to worship you." So into the furnace they go. It's stoked hot, we're told 7 times hotter than normal. As they're thrown in, the soldiers who throw them in through the entrance of the furnace are themselves destroyed by the fire. A few moments later, King Nebuchadnezzar happens to look in and says, "Look, were there not 3 men we threw in there? I see the 3 men wandering around, walking around unharmed, but now I see a 4th man as if the son of the gods." God showed up, and all 3 of those men were brought out, and they said, we're told that even the smell of the smoke was not on them, and God was glorified. Of course, then there's Jonah. Jonah's running from God. God tells him to go to Nineveh and preach. No, Jonah says, "Nope, don't want to do it. The Ninevites hate us, and I hate them, and I am not going to see them come to God." Well, Jonah gets on a ship, tries to run. God brings a storm. They throw Jonah overboard to protect the rest of the people on the ship, and a whale swallows Jonah. Talk about ignominy. Jonah's in this slimy intestinal tract of the whale for 3 days. It's dark. I can't imagine how it smells. And as Jonah begins to pray, God now points that whale right back where God wanted Jonah to begin with, Nineveh. And before it's done, the whale burps or throws up or coughs, however he did it, and Jonah finds himself laying on the beach of Nineveh. God stepped into a hopeless situation. But that's not just Old Testament stories. We find it in the New Testament as well. Listen to what Paul tells us about his life. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, and I am beginning with verse 7. "But we have this treasure in jars of clay, and it's to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. We are perplexed, but not driven to despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Struck down, but not destroyed." He goes on to say later that this is done so that you can see God at work in us. Couple chapters later in 2 Corinthians, now I'm going over to chapter 11, beginning with verse 23. Paul is still writing to this same group of people, and he's talking about some of the things that he's been through. They're bragging about some of the other traveling evangelists, and Paul says, whoa, don't forget where I've been. Here's what he says. He said, I have been in more imprisonments with countless beatings and often near death. 5 times I received at the hands of the Jews the 40 lashes less one. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was adrift in the sea. On frequent journeys, in danger from rivers, danger from robbers, danger from my own people, in danger from Gentiles, in danger from the city, in danger from the wilderness, in danger at sea, in danger from false brothers. In toil and in hardship through many a sleepless night, in hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure. And apart from the other things, there's a daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches. Then he goes on to say that God did all of this, allowed all of this to happen, so that God's glory could be seen in Paul. So that in Paul's weaknesses, in Paul's dead ends, God could show up. One other example, a man by the name of Joseph. He's his father's favorite son, the baby of the family. His brothers get jealous, they get upset, they throw him while they're out tending sheep. They throw him in a pit with the intention of leaving him there. Probably rolled a rock over him so he couldn't get out. Now he's in the hot, dry desert, no food, no water, and life is not going to last very long. However, along comes a caravan, and the brothers decide, shoot, let's get a little money out of this thing, and they sell him into slavery. So he goes from the pit, he goes into slavery, and through a series of misadventures, that is, he is convicted of something he didn't do. He's thrown into prison. So now he goes from the pit to the prison, and from there to the palace. For you see, God walked into that situation and said, you're the man that I need to save not only the Egyptian nation from the coming famine, but the future of my people as well. And God used Joseph to save his entire family that were back in Canaan. He now brings them to Egypt so that they can be saved along with the Egyptians. And thus the people of God are saved. Here's the deal. God is not scared by hopeless situations. In fact, I would argue that God excels in hopeless situations. No matter how bad they look, no matter how bad they sound, God still has his hand on our lives. He speaks through Jeremiah to the Israelites, and he says, I'll never forget you. I have your name engraved in the palm of my hand. I have plans for you, plans for a hope and a future. And that's what he says to us. So here's the thought I want to leave you with today. No matter how bad it seems, no matter how difficult situations, and I don't know what your situation is, whether it's a health issue or a financial issue or you're just the economy's got your back to the wall. There are all kinds of places we can find ourselves. Certainly the enemy is out to destroy us by whatever means. And yet God has not forgotten us. The God that rescued Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, Daniel, Joseph, Paul, it's the same God who will rescue us as well. Dead ends, they don't bother him. Hopeless situations, they don't bother him. For he is the God of hope. And that's what he offers us tonight. Now look forward to seeing you next week back in the Pastor Study.